You know, dad humor. Well, someone told me a dad joke this week, which is as bad as they all are. And I've loved it so much, I'm telling everybody, and now it's your turn. And it has nothing to do with my sermon. I'm not even going to try to link this, okay? So there's your disclaimer. It's not my joke. It has nothing to do with the service, but I love it. So that's the disclaimer. So a dog walks into a butcher's store. You've heard this before. With a purse in its mouth. He puts the purse down and sits in front of the meat case, right? Butcher shop. And the butcher says, "What is it, boy? Do you want to buy some meat?" And the dog goes, "Woof." He said, "What do you want? Steak? Silence. Hamburger? Silence. Bacon? Woof. All right, you want bacon. How much do you want? A pound? 2 pounds? A pound and a half? Woof. So he wraps up a pound and a half of bacon, looks at the purse, takes out some money, puts the bacon in the purse, the dog puts the handle in his mouth, and heads off. Well, the butcher is astounded, as you would be too. Follows the dog home. The dog scratches at the door of where he was going. Well, the man who opens the door is yelling at the dog. He's angry. And the butcher says, "Are you crazy? This dog is astounding. He just is the most intelligent dog I've ever seen." Intelligent? Intelligent? This is the 3rd time this week he's forgotten his key. No, you're going to tell that joke. That's the terrible thing about these jokes. It sticks with you. Well, another thing that stuck with me was going out to Richmond about 6 years ago with Ingrid Hartliff Brown. You remember Ingrid? She preached here a couple of times. Well, Ingrid was at that time a student on Bowen Island where I was the minister. And we went off to Richmond to have a weekend with Eric Law. Now, I don't know if he came here too. Did he come to Victoria? Maybe not. He's American. He's an Episcopal priest. And he'd written a book that he was talking about called Cycle of Blessings. And Ingrid and I were there, and we just kept on taking notes and commenting because what he talked about was stewardship. And it wasn't stewardship. It was just wonderful. So he talked about the cycle as a currency. So our building becomes a currency. Our relationships are a currency. He reformats that whole idea. When we speak the truth, it's a currency. But it's only a currency when it's in motion, like water. So when we're talking about health and wellness, and it's great to have Kyla here this morning, when we have talking about health and wellness, that's part of the flow of blessings. We call these all currencies of blessings. And you know, when you're talking about stewardship, the quick answer is always God owns everything, Stewardship 101. And he says this is the flow of understanding that. Our time, our place is in the flow. Our leadership. These are all the currencies of blessing. And so today we're talking about reaching out to the community beyond us. And I can remember a time in the church, probably, I see Dr. Saunders is here, and he might even be able to help me, that you might even experience that out here before I moved out west. But of the crunch between people who said, we can't spend our money, we have to hold it for a rainy day, and people who said, no, we have to spend our money in the community. We have to turn out. And they seem to be at conflict. And that's a very dated fight. It's funny looking back, right? It's like hearing about the people whose parents didn't like their long hair. Yeah, well, now they're covered in tattoos. That long hair didn't look so bad, does it? So Eric Law calls those two things sustainable ministry. We want to hold on to our resources. And missional ministry. We want to follow Christ into the community. He doesn't see that as a conflict at all. He sees that as part of the flow of those currencies. And as soon as I say that, I'm sure you can understand the wisdom of his vision. So he's talking about how we go out. We understand hanging on to anything can make it useless. When I was in high school, Expo 67 was the big news in Montreal. Who went to Expo 67? Yeah, it was great, wasn't it? I bought a jade candle of some Asian figurine. I don't actually know who she was or he, but it was a green colored jade candle. I didn't treat it as a candle. I held on to it. I tried to stop it in time. Have you ever kept a candle too long? It's not pretty after about 5 years, is it? You think, why didn't I burn that when I bought it? It would have been lovely at the time. Now it's kind of tacky with everything in the air. Not a good scene. This is what happens when we try to hang on to things that are meant to be in the flow. A candle is meant to be burnt, not to be treated like marble. Marble is not to be treated like a candle. So in that flow of the currency, we think about all these blessings that become the blessings when we move on them. When we have a relationship, it's a blessing when we're both in the relationship, when we are in the relationship with the North Park Community Association. It's a beautiful thing because it puts us in the flow. And did you notice what else was in that? Relationships. Did you recognize some of those people in that video? I did. Our leadership, Sarah, as well as the people in the Evolutionary Church, Evolve Committee. They're the relationship that are part of that blessing. We were able to make good use of our hall. We made it available, both the time and the space. All those currencies then become into the flow. It's not a crunch anymore. It's how can we put them all into motion as we face out from a sustainable base. It's a wonderful understanding now for us that we don't have to be in conflict. It used to be, if you're talking about money, you're not being a very good Christian. What? How do they think we keep the lights on? But if you don't talk about money, I'll tell you something. Everybody else is, and they're taking it very seriously. So what do they know? That it's part of that flow. Like my green candle from Expo, you can't hang on to it because that's not what it's for. It's for generating, like the Healing Fund. There are some bequests in that generate a little interest every year as part of the flow. Holding on to it wouldn't have generated that blessing, that currency of blessing, that circle, if you can imagine it. So it's like business cards. When you make business cards, you don't make them to hang on to them. You make them to pass them out. Here, take 3. You might find someone who wants to buy a car, right? We're always trying to pass them out. And so in the church, we have other things we pass out. We might pass out cards, but not necessarily. But we are wanting to pass around, which is good. But here's the other thing Eric Law told me that we were really impressed with. We talked about it afterwards at the break, which is he said, you have to be in the flow, as in giving, you have to be able to receive. You can't see yourself as the eternal donor and everyone else as a recipient. That doesn't honor them. It doesn't honor you. The complexity of our relationship is that we are both the recipient and the giver. And that's why there's not a conflict anymore, I hope, in most churches. So we have the courage to move into the community with all our blessings, our leadership, our space, all those things, and then we receive back. It is a blessing from them to know that we're helping, what did she say, 50 families? 55 families every week. That's a blessing, yes, that we receive because we're in that relationship. So this week, as we look at our stewardship campaign and we talk about what are we doing in the community, we see with, I think, his help, that we have our internal relationships, the committees like the one Emily leads, the Evolving Church, the spiritual care and wellness, and our advocate under Kyla. These are internal organizations. But when we offer a meditation class to the community, when we offer yoga to the community, we're turning what those internal relationships are, we're offering them out. When we meet those people from the community, they in turn bless us. If we can't receive their blessings, that stops the process right there. But we do. We have been touched and engaged, and we have grown because of our external relationships and our internal relationships. This is, in fact, a currency of blessing. We are all part of that exchange in God's plan. We are all meant by the gift of the Sacred Spirit to receive from other people. I think that's been one of the hardest things about COVID-19, is being separated out. Sending a check is one thing, but just one thing. And so now we're slowly coming out again, and we're able to both give and receive, whether it be a smile and a quick comment with somebody here at church, at Tim Hortons, on the street. We're freed from just being on Zoom or the phone. So there's something going on here right now coming out of the pandemic, and it's an interesting thing. I know that in the next 10 years, a lot of doctorates will be written on that, which is called the Great Resignation. Have you heard about it? 17%, people say, of every organization at every pay scale, volunteer, paid, highly skilled, level entry, 17% have resigned. They're not going back. They don't want to be a Rotarian anymore, a member of the congregation anymore, a high-paid executive anymore, serving in a bar. You've seen the effect of that because our news has carried it. How hard it is to get staff. You've all seen those stories, I'm sure. You might even have experienced it when you've tried to get something. And now we're hearing about it. Petrol shortages in Britain. We're hearing about buy your Christmas presents this week before the shelves are empty. The Great Resignation is affecting not just us in our internal relationships, but also our external relationships. So in the currency of blessing, I'd just like to conclude with this petition. When you interact with the people who haven't resigned, healthcare workers or people serving Panago pizzas, remember that they're experiencing a 17% cut of people around them. Our organizations that we interact with are also experiencing that, as are we ourselves. I think why I believe the PhDs will be written, because I love those theses, you can download them, is to explain the different motivations for people. Because they're not, I don't think, pulling out of the currency of blessing, but they're placing themselves on a different zone in that currency of blessing. It's far too soon to know anything more than that's the first thing that's happened. We have no idea what's going to happen next. But as we go from this time, we remember in prayer all those organizations we're part of, whether it's through gifts through our mission and service or volunteering here on the street, working down at First Our Place. We know that this is a time for us to find in the currency, the flow, to be both recipient and donor over and over again. And our lives become richer and our church becomes more effective. And more than that, they will all know who we are, and we will know who they are. And that will be the blessing. Amen.